Okay, let's go to the bad though, or the dangerous, the tempting, and this is the depression one. So sadness, which some people, because when people say sadness, they could mean the emotional side, they could mean the kind of dispositional character trait side, or they very oftentimes mean like the psychological, the depression side of things. Yeah. So the psychological aspect of sadness here. And this we want to be, I think, more ruthless with, not in the sense of like, depressed people, get out of here, but in the sense of saying, actually, it's not a good thing to be depressed. You might be depressed. There might be situations, of course, you get a cold, but actually this is something that hinders your flourishing in a way that melancholy doesn't hinder your flourishing, but actually is to be taken up the shape of that. Does that sound as a starting point?
I think so. Yeah. I think like with all things, as you were saying, it depends on like what we're talking about in the sense of melancholy as a sort of temperament and disposition, or something that is like, a mental struggle and illness and that sort of thing. And in that latter category, we can't affirm it to be a good thing. We just can't. I mean, does it mean that like somehow some people who suffer depression and whatever various forms, whether like clinically or less clinically or whatever, that there's less of a person? No, of course not. But the condition of having a sadness that sort of governs life and it's kind of can be crippling in ways we don't want to, say there's
and it is
good there.
And it is important to distinguish between. You might think if someone's depressed, you might say, "Oh, I'm actually melancholic," but this is a real distinction between the spiritual aspect of sadness and the psychological aspect of sadness. Even though, of course, psyche and soul are related, but we mean the kind of what we might say today, the psychological or the biochemical or whatever you might be, which requires or is very oftentimes helped through treatment, cognitive behavioralist treatment or analysis or just SSRI. And there are plenty of things out there that people can take to help with this kind of sadness that they ought not to have.
Right.
And it's not, again, a lot of times it's just a physical malady. And I think there's a stigma around depression that people don't want to say, I think I might be depressed, so I should go and get checked out or something. And we live in the 21st century. We have available at our hands psychology, psychologists, psychiatry, a lot of tools that don't need to replace confession, don't need to replace all of this kind of stuff, don't need to replace God, but can
also
actually
don't need to replace friends,
or any of this thing. But that there are some depressions that are very treatable with just chemicals and with things just like a vitamin in a sense for the mind. And I think that's for the person. I think that's a stigma point, and you have to get to a point where realizing it's okay to admit that and look into it. And if it is, that's something that can be helped and aided by these medications, then there's nothing wrong with that. It's not your fault that you're depressed. It's just it's not your fault if you have other chemical reactions, like you're allergic to certain things or something. And I think people might be hesitant with that, but it's an important dimension to realize that you don't need to be depressed. And you want to ask yourself, is my depression a character trait, or is it just part of my psychological makeup that I could be aided in? And that you won't be changed. This is the problem. I think people worry that, but part of it is my personality, and so if I go on this medication, it's going to snow me over and make me a different person. No one will recognize me. And I can tell you people do not. You will be the best person as you ought to be. You'll still be melancholic, probably. It's not going to turn you into like the life of the party or something. Yeah. But you'll feel like there's no more weight, I guess, on your thinking. And sometimes depression can feel like there's a sort of languidness and a weight on my life, like I'm just walking, through water.
Father Jacob Bertrand.
Father Gregory.
A Dominican, a Franciscan, and a Jesuit walk into a bar. One of them asks the audience to subscribe. That's not a joke. Any ways you can improve upon it?
Just don't tell jokes.
Right. This is not a joke. Please subscribe. Cheers.